Hello, good day everyone. This is Dandy Bigno Pakibot, your demonstrator for this pre-recorded video. And how's your day? Do you feeling great? Oh, good to hear that. Okay, Jane, kindly lead a prayer. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Okay, so before we proceed our discussion in this pre-recorded video, who can recall what is our last topic? Yes, how about Jacob? Oh, very good, Jacob. Our last topic or the story we tackle is about the Great Gatsby and To the Lighthouse of Virginia Woolf. I have here collage images and kindly give your idea or observation about the pictures I've shown. So here it is. Okay, so what have you noticed about the collage images? Yes, showed it. Oh yes, there is um, a different scene. How about Diane? Yes, very good. There is a different perspective in every images. So, okay, so now you have an idea what uh, lesson or a poem that I am going to discuss. So, okay, kindly listen attentively. Okay, so let's start. Before we proceed, the poem entitled The Wasteland, let's know who is the writer of the poem. So, Thomas Stearns Eliot or T.S. Eliot. He was a poet, essayist, publisher, playwright, literary critic, and editor, and considered one of the 20th century's major poets. He is a central figure in English language modernist poetry. And he was born on September 26, 1888 and died January 4, 1965. He was a child of Henry Ware Eliot and Charlotte Champy Steers. And in 1915, he married her first wife, Vivian Highwood. Around this time, Eliot's wife, Vivian, became increasingly sick and mental disturbed. And also in 1915, he met Ezra Pound, which became his mentor and editor. Okay, let's proceed to the famous poem right by Thomas Stearns Eliot, The Wasteland. The Wasteland, Thomas Stearns Eliot uses various allusions and references to highlight the degradation of modern relationships, in which Thomas Eliot is the what? He is the central figure in English language in modernist poetry. And The Wasteland, it is the complex and influential modernist poem that explores themes of cultural decay, spiritual emptiness, and the fragmentation of modern society. And it is considered as one of the most important poems of the 20th century. The Wasteland was published in 1922, which reflects the disillusionment and despair of the post-World War I era. It portrays a fragmented and decaying society where the traditional values and beliefs have been lost or corrupted. The poem incorporates multiple voices, perspectives, and literary allusions, creative scenes of disorientation and fragmentation. The poem Wasteland is divided into 5 sections or parts. The first one is the Burial of the Dead, a game of chess, the fire sermon, death by water, and what the thunder said, which Each section presents a different perspective and theme, but they are all interconnected, forming a fragmented and multifaceted exploration rather of the mold condition. In the Burial of the Dead, it was divided by four stanza, in which each stanza has different perspective. Okay, so try to look at the first stanza. And to make you understand more about the first stanza is it talks about the seasons and the landscapes of the poem and how the characters feels about them. They are not a fan of spring. Normally, spring brings new growth and the idea of rebirth, but in the view of the character. All that spring rain brings are dull roots. Eliot then makes a reference to a few locations in Germany, and the character is now with someone who he talks and drinks coffee with. The speaker is having a conversation in a German about what it takes to be a real German. And then it flashbacks to the character's childhood and tells a story of when she used to stay at her cousin's, who was a prince, house and used to go sledding together, and how free she used to feel, which is this stanza ends with the focus is brought to go back to the present, and we can assume by the description that she is the most likely an older lady now that is nothing like who she was a child. In the first stanza, it talks about how will be the past or how to be a real German according to the speaker, which he admires the old lady when she was a child because it has a conversation between the speaker and the old lady. Okay, so try to look at the second stanza of the Burial of the Dead. Okay, so in the stanza 2, it introduces a different character speaking. The speaker is describing the harsh environment and how it relates to a human relations. It is talking about how the trees are dead and how it is very discerning. The character seems to be aiming his speech at someone because he accuses the person of being superficial rather than making a meaningful logic about one's life. It talks about how did trees mean the spirits are dead and gives no comfort. That no sound of water is interpreted mean that there is a tears of the water but that there isn't any to be found. There is a little shade to be found anywhere else which would leave a person in a lot of discomfort. We can assume that the character is probably in a desert due to the lack of living trees, water, and shades. This sets a very unhappy tone with an environment surrounded by discomfort. Eliot then begins to talk about the person's shadow and how it in the morning following and the one in the evening approaching. This can be interpreted the cycle of the life. Everyone comes and goes and eventually dies, turning to dust. Wow. It then switches over a few lines in a warning suddenly her love ended. It then goes on to say how this left her in a state of complete emptiness, feeling and nothing. In the second stanza, the speaker might be in the desert, which is talks about his observation of just like there is no water, the trees, and the suns. And according to the Eliot, he concludes that everyone comes and goes and eventually dies, turning to dust, which is true. So in the third stanza, this is a short stanza located to the burial of the dead, in which this stanza starts off talking about Madame Sosostres, a fortune teller. It talks about how even though she is known to be the wisest woman in Europe, even she gets bad colds when she can be interpreted that even the wisest people suffer. She starts off by the reading or tarot cards out to the person. Card after card, she only pulls out the cards that reveal bad luck and hardships. In one way or another, she also couldn't find the card that represent in spiritual rebirth. She tells him that she's a crowd of people walking around lost in direction. So, in the third stanza, Madam Soso Stress is kanang mang puhula, which is makapredict siya it is a good or bad by using a cards. In the last stanza, it is spoken from the point of view of the man looking over at the people. Eliot describes it as an unreal city during the winter at dawn. Crowds of people are cruising the London Bridge walking as if they are zombies. People are saying and seem to be very unhappy with their current state. They are said to be walking toward the church bell at 9 o'clock. So this is a recurring relation of death and religion. He then goes to say that recognizes someone in the crowd as a man who went to war with him. Out of nothing, he asked the man about a corpse that he buried a year earlier in the garden. He asked if it had spouted, as he assumed that from the dead corpse, life would be renewed in it. In overall, the burial of the dead, this section of the poem reflects on the spiritual and emotional emptiness of post-World War I society, and it portrays a bleak and desolate landscape with references to the myth of the Fisher King and the biblical story of the resurrection of Lazarus. In the second section of The Wasteland, a game of the chess, which is talks about a woman or uh, influences by the mythological story about Cleopatra in the story of the Sirens, which in the section of the game of the chess, Eliot alludes to the story of the sirens from the Greek mythology, which means the sirens is where mythical creatures who lured sailors to their deaths with their enchanting voices. When this allusion suggests that seductive and destructive nature of sexual desire in modern relationship. And overall, a game of the chess is uses the metaphor of a game of the chess to depict a failed sexual encounter between a man and a woman, and it explores themes of desire, disillusionment, and the objectification of women. The third section is entitled The Fire Sermon, which is taken from a religious sermon given by the Buddha, which encouraged his listeners to give up and seek freedom from earthly passions which are presented by fire. This idea of turning away from the earth is a prominent theme in this section. This section opens up with a river scene which Eliot describes to be filthy and dirty. the river talked about in the poem, and most likely the theme river in the London, as Eliot alludes to several times within the text. It is polluted with garbage such as empty bottles, sandwich papers, and other debris, as well as the rats and the ugly sensations. The speaker within the text is fishing in the river and musing upon the king by Brothers Rick. In the background, from time to time, the speaker can be hear the sounds of horns and motors. So in the fast forward, the poem did this section comes to an end with a few lines from the St. Augustine's Confessions and yet another allusions to Buddha fire sermon, which in the overall the fire sermon it draws to the Buddhist concept of the fire sermon, which emphasizes the impermanence and suffering of life, and it explores themes of desire, lust, and the degradation of modern relationships. Let's proceed to the fourth sections of the wasteland, which is the death of water. So, the death of the water is the shortest of the five parts in the wasteland. Eliot describes in the text a man called Pleblas, the Polynesian who has drowned in the sea, whereas the body has been picked apart and eaten by a sea creatures. Eliot expresses in the final stanza the importance of valuing life because, like Plebas, everyone will die eventually, so you might as well live your life how you want to. Or in the analysis of the death of the water is as long as you alive, you must do everything what do you want to do. And the overall of the death of the water, this section reflects on the destructive power of the water and its symbolic significance, and it explores themes of drowning, rebirth, and cyclical nature of life. And the last section is what the thunder said, which this section builds on the images of death and sterility. Just for example of the section of the discussion of Jesus Christ, which is he who was living is now dead, but in our hearts still alive, which describes scenes of the Christ's journey to Emmaus following his resurrection, where he joins two disciples that do not recognize him. Who is a third who walks always beside you? One disciple asked the other. However, this image is also commonly interpreted as an allusion for the discovery expedition. It was noted that the party of explorers were facing near death when they began experiencing the constant delusion that there was one of the member of the following beside them who did not belong. The hallucination creates the idea that the third, which Eliot refers to, could also be a projection of anxieties and traumas everyone addresses in life, which is in overall the, what Thunder said. This section offers a glimmer of hope and redemption, and it explores themes of spiritual renewal, the search of for meaning, and the possibility of the transcendence. Themes for the poem of The Wasteland. The first is the brokenness and isolation of modern life, death and rebirth, religion, spirituality and nihilism, sex, lust, and impotence. Okay, so in overall, throughout the poem, Eliot draws on a wide range of cultural, literary, and religious references, including the mythology, literature, and the Bible. This references serves to highlight the spiritual emptiness and the cultural decay of the modern world. So the wasteland also explores themes of love, desire, sexuality, and the degradation of modern relationships. It depicts field sexual encounters, objectification of women, and the loss of intimacy and connection. Okay, for your oral participation, I will call someone to answer my question. Okay, Jane. So, kindly give your reflection about the poem entitled "The Wasteland" by Thomas Stearns Eliot. Yes. Okay, exactly. Which is it is dedicated to Ezra Pound and the Wasteland. It talks about the cultural decay and the allusions, which is it is including the references of mythology and influences by the Bible. So I think that's it for my pre-recorded video, and I hope you learned something, and that would be all. And have a great day, everyone. Goodbye.